Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Human Role. This one, as mentioned in the last episode, we are going to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And my very, very special guest is Terri Moore. Terri, thank you so much. Welcome to The Human Role. Really excited to have you on this very important topic. So as everyone knows, this goes along with the neurodiversity in the workplace episode, the culture episode, and DEI&B is going to end this kind of section that I'm having with my podcast taping. So I really feel like it's just all encompasses culture in the workplace that we need to pay attention to from an HR stance. So Terri, I want to just give you the floor a little bit just to kind of give your background. Terri has an extensive background in this side of the house. She even taught me the new letter B and belonging as well behind DEI and B now, which I'm very thankful for. So that was very eye-opening. But Terri, going to give you the floor. Let my network know your experience, your background, and then from there, we'll kind of take a deeper dive into our topic.
Awesome. You know what? Thank you so much for having me, Tiana. For me, it's fun to actually talk about this topic. Some people, it really, grasps them in a way that sometimes they're not sure as to what to do with it. But I've been working in this field for so long that it's kind of like, it's just what we do, right? We see everything through a DEI&B lens. And so my background actually starts with, I absolutely love career development. And it just so happens that one of my first jobs at a university focused on the fact that it was a career development role and also a diversity role. At the time, we weren't even talking about inclusion. That's how long ago it was. And I started with that. And it was funny because when I got to this particular university, I was told that, okay, so the diversity piece, of course, you'll focus on students of color. And I'm like, okay, great. However, by the end of, I think it was 3 or 4 years that I was there, my role encompassed not only students of color, but students with disabilities, our pride communities, having the opportunity to work with students from at that time, the second year class, because no one was paying attention to how we prepare them for their jobs, and then athletes. And again, it's just a true testament to what diversity is. And then, of course, equity, in a sense of being able to understand how to get to parity, we talk about fairness, well, understanding that equity, if we do it right, we'll get to fairness, but we're not there yet. Everybody needs something different in order to get to having what we all need. And for some of us, we started in different spaces. And so we have to be brought up to speed, And so that's really taking the time to figure out what's equitable for each person and what they need for their career, their community resources, lots of areas of equity. We think about pay. And then, of course, we'll get to belonging in just a few moments. But so it started in that college job for me. And it was absolutely an amazing career move for myself. And then my boss actually was the person who said, I think you might want to try something new and different. I think you can run a college relations program. And so introduced me to a colleague. He sponsored me and introduced me to a colleague that was a friend of his. And I then took on the internship program for about 500 interns. It's so interesting. Wow. And and you talk about diversity. Yep. It was every day in every space, and those interns were all over the U.S. So not only do you have the diversity of each and every student that's your intern, but you're working with different parts of the country who also may not think about internships in the same way that you do. So as an organization, we had to come to an understanding as to what we wanted students to experience and how they were going to be treated in that space for that summer. Right? Because ultimately we wanted to turn them into full-time employees. So we had to show up well for them. Right. And that included having, strong inclusion experiences. So I got involved with diversity through that particular role and have been doing it ever since. And so I've seen it go from diversity, I guess it was affirmative action. Yeah, it was affirmative action. And then it moved into diversity, and then inclusion was added. And now we've also added equity. And in a lot of cases, belonging is part of that.
No, that's beautiful. I like to hear everyone's journey, especially because we always, like in my payroll world, there's not a degree for that, right? People just kind of like fall into payroll. So it's interesting that someone, hey, gave you a chance and you took it on, and then it just developed right into even more, which is beautiful. And I think you also just said another key point as far as not just race, right? Because I think a lot of people at times identify this world with just race, but you also talked about people with disabilities, which also goes along with my neurodiversity episode that we did a few weeks back, where we talked about
really interesting, by the way.
Yes, with thank you, with autism, right? ADHD. And so I think with that, and even leading into culture and now this, what would you say, how would you specifically define the terms? You've already given us some background, right, on some of that, but maybe we can kind of bring it all together as well for some people, because I'm interested in even knowing the belonging piece, because I'm trying to get people to see. I know in our world, we know it encompasses everyone, but for someone who may not be in the HR world, I don't think people actually realize that this literally encompasses everyone, right? And so even in my AI episode, the guest that I had on, he was mentioning that people are trying to code into AI to not always just pick up on a white male, for example. And they're doing that so much. Now they're starting to discriminate against white males because they've gotten so many checks in them, right? Mm-hmm. And so at some point, I feel like it is going to include everyone, and so curious on how you think each one is really defined and how all of it is connected, especially when we talk about people from other cultures, because sometimes they don't understand our culture and vice versa, right? And, people could be offended when they really shouldn't be. So just curious on kind of your definition of DEI.
Hi, I'm Carmen Hudson. I'm the host of the Recruiting Book Club, and we're starting our second season. I'm so excited to bring to you another set of guests of recruiters who have written books. We are excited to have some very special guests this season. We've got Shally, we've got Craig Fisher, James Ellis, and quite a few other people that we're going to bring on board to tell us about what they wrote, why they wrote it, and maybe we'll veer off into a conversation about recruiting on all types of topics and subjects that happen in our industry. So I hope you can join us. I'm excited.
It's so interesting because when I think about the concept of diversity, I guess just, from the mere fact of doing this work for so long, I can almost tell 3 or 4 different diversity aspects for anybody that I meet, any walk of life. Yeah. And it's kind of cool because I'm looking for it. And so when I think about it, a company I used to work for, a large company that focused on talent management, global talent management, focused on the fact that diversity is a fact, right? It just is. Whether it's how you communicate, if you prefer or have the orientation of being an introvert or an extrovert, it's the values that you have. It's the education that you decide that you're going to have, whether that is formalized or more if it's on the job experience, right? All of these things. And so it's how you wear your hair. It's if you get your knee, I had a knee surgery. And so I had a disability for quite some time that I wasn't born with. But absolutely, when I walk into spaces right now, I look at it very differently than when I did before I had my knee surgery. I needed support. So all of these things and so much more, it's infinite as to the diversity aspects that are out there. And so what becomes really important about the diversity piece is understanding how are you then treating people who are different. In some cases have some similarities, but really, how are you valuing, respecting, and supporting them? When you think about diversity from that perspective, it's okay, if it's something that I'm uncomfortable with, then what am I going to do? And it's take a pause. Why are you uncomfortable? It's usually something with you and not with them. And when you take a pause and you sit back and you think about, okay, what's making me uncomfortable right now? That's when you start doing the internal work around this. And that's what's so important about this concept. Sometimes there are situations in our life that happen when we're even young that made us afraid of something or made us think twice about something. And so we carry that into adulthood. Can't always explain it, but usually it was something that, someone that we loved and trusted, they reacted to something. So now we react in that way. And a lot of times we can't explain it. But the key here is when it comes down to diversity in many, many ways, not business is absolutely one that you can look and you can find the research that says organizations that are diverse and inclusive. So they have diversity in many ways, not just race, not just religion, not just gender, but in many ways. And that diversity, there are inclusive behaviors, managing for inclusion. So managing inclusion, being conscious of inclusion, of inclusive behaviors. If you have strong diversity and inclusion, your organization is probably going to outperform others because you're using it in a way that allows for you to be innovative, take some risks, get to know each other, build relationships. And that's when people start to feel very comfortable, have what we call a growth mindset. I love reading all about Carol Dweck and growth mindsets and the work that she does there. And, you think about the fact that it takes someone who can be open, someone who can be receptive, someone who can be curious, but that with that curiosity means that you're going to share something about yourself too. You don't just go and ask people questions about themselves and not put something else out there about yourself. All of that gets into into this focus. But I go back to that term fear. And for some people, difference, for many reasons, differences for them, it's equating to be fearful of something. So then I don't want to be around it. I don't want anything to do with it. When in fact, it can open up your world in so many different ways, teach you so many different experiences.
I feel like this is a therapy session. I'm like, just like soaking it all in. It's like, that is so true, right? Like how many times I guess naturally we do it as well, but like a lot of times it is a self-projection, right? And just something that you may be scared of, something that you experience. And it's always hard for someone else not to be offended. And so, so then that becomes plenty of HR issues that I've seen, in past companies that we've had to deal with, right? And so you're right, it is the difference. The differences of everybody, which is natural, but how do we come to a conclusion with that based on businesses? And I think that's why it's really key for companies to really invest in this, right? And take it seriously. And, whether that's having gatherings, right? Or having, I know one company that I assist, they have it already programmed in their system where randomly the system will select two people, right? And just have a minute chat, right? Just so you can talk to them, right? And so I think that gets rid of the nervousness, I guess, or the unfamiliarity, that people have with one another, which I think is good. So look, if you're running a business out there, we need you to take this seriously. I know there's a lot of things in the news, but this is really critical for everyone to feel included, especially in a space now where the majority of us are at home, right? And so it is kind of hard to connect in person as we used to. Can you share any strategies or practices? So say a business is trying to implement this or need to correct what they've implemented, any, strategies and practices that you've seen on your end that could be beneficial?
I think that for a lot of organizations, they feel as though we're doing it to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And absolutely, it is the right thing to do, but there are ways to do it that are also more effective than others. So it can't be just that. It needs to be a business strategy like anything else. Why are you doing it and understand that? How does it fit within your business outcomes? How, when you think about the work that you're doing, how does it connect to the values of the organization? In what ways does diversity show up in your organization where maybe it is not being valued, respected, and supported? And being able to think about how do we change that? Sometimes it takes looking at where things are being valued, respected, and supported, and taking some of those learnings and putting it to the place where it's not happening. It's interesting, and you and I, Tiana, we talked about a few organizations that I've worked with in the past that really figured this out. And they figured it out. I always say you want to build relationships and really good opportunities to communicate effectively. Because by the way, communication skills, number one area of diversity.
Agreed.
When you're not communicating effectively with colleagues, with people at home, it's hard.
Yeah.
And we found that several organizations that we worked with, and I worked at that global organization, we had certain organizations that when 2020 happened and our world was trying to figure things out, we were, on Zoom and at home and trying to figure out if Target was going to have toilet paper today or not. And there was a lot of stress going on that was just basic humanistic stress. And then on top of that, we had a lot of violence and a lot of reaction to that, mainly because we were all at home and children were able to ask questions and parents were like, I don't know how to answer this. I've just seen the most horrific thing happen and I watched it with my child, and how do I deal with this? And then you get on your Zoom call with your colleagues and everybody's still stunned. And it's like, how do you manage this? Well, we had one organization, it's an insurance organization. It's so interesting because I love the fact that, and it makes sense, because if you think about really strong insurance organization environments, they are all about understanding and managing risk. And this particular organization decided well before 2020 happened that their organization really needed to understand how to have courageous conversations. Now, there's a book called Courageous Conversations. There's all types of courses that are called Courageous Conversations, but they called us as their vendor and said, hey, can you help us to be able to strategize better on how to connect with one another, how to have these conversations, but not always need a lead of DEI or an HR person to lead the conversation. Can you help to train some of our employees that don't specifically focus on that seemingly each day? I actually believe we all focus on it each day, but we choose what we're going to focus on. So we did this series of trainings for them. And it was amazing. They were the organization that didn't have to call us when 2020 happened because they already had their strategy. They had been practicing it for like 3 years, and they started having those courageous conversation circles. And literally, it was amazing how they had, they would always have 2 leaders, and then they have about 12 people, and everyone could just talk. And it wasn't, you weren't there to solve something. You were there to listen. You were there to seek understanding of other people. Usually it was a room where, you were invited into a space. At that time we were on Zoom or whatever video platform. And so you'd show up and you didn't know who else was going to show up, but you're in that space and you make the commitment to show up for other people in a way that you, once again, are listening, you're respecting, you're valuing what other people say, right? And you're also sharing. And it's not about putting a nice, neat bow on, okay, we all came to the same conclusion. No, because we're diverse. We're never going to do that. But I can respect what you share with me. I can now know something else about you. So I know, Tiana, I need to ask you, how is your cat doing today? How is, things that I learned about you just because we've shared this space together. It's valuable, and it's proven to be valuable for them in a really important way because they can do this for themselves. They don't have to call in a facilitator to do it anymore. It's also about learning skills in this space. These are some basic skills that, quite frankly, when you continue to hone them, you become really good at listening. You become really good at suspending judgment, at taking a pause. These are the things that are really important. Really thinking about, can I hear your perspective? And can I know a little bit about your story as to what got you there? Without saying, oh, let me tell you mine. Let me tell you my story. You'll have a chance, but listen to what they have to share.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. And it's good to know that there were some companies that weren't completely turned upside down when COVID happened, because I think the vast majority of companies, right, did not have disaster relief plans in place, along with, plans of DEI&B as well. So curious too, even with your experience, any organizations that came your way that had nothing in place that ended up having very positive, successful stories after they've implemented? Because I love the example you gave, and then the time frame. They had already been working on it for 3 years, right? So this isn't for anyone who's building out, the plan and thinking, okay, within the next 30 days, it's going to be perfect. Essentially, you're dealing with people. You do have to train people. Yeah. And trust that they will essentially be handling things properly on the floor, right? And that doesn't always, pan out well sometimes. So it is going to take time. Not everyone can be perfect, but curious to know, any examples of where things just were not in place, and then once you guys came in, or you came in and helped guide them in the right place, how successful their story ended up being.
You know what? I have to talk about one of my, and I still call her a colleague. We don't work for the same organization. As a matter of fact, she owns her own advisory service now. But I have to call her out. And the organization that we worked for at the time really stepped up. Her name is Audra Bohannon. When 2020 happened, and we literally, we had calls coming from globally. And this time, the calls weren't coming from the diversity and inclusion leaders. They were coming from the leaders of the organizations. And it was so interesting to have CEOs that were taking the pause. They were really taking the pause, and they were saying, I got to do something different. This is different. First of all, we're in a global pandemic. That's different. Right. And I care about my people. And I feel like, I can't be in the office and just corral everybody and do it all hands in the office. Well, we have to learn how to do all hands meetings on Zoom. Okay, but what am I going to say? And literally Audra Bohannon, Kathy Riddleman, there are some others that were in my leadership team that came together and developed a program. And it was a Real Talk program. I can't remember the exact title, but it was so wonderful to watch a program unfold where literally it was a communication. It was a conversation. But what was important about the conversation with the people that we were having a conversation with, which we started at the top of the house with a lot of organizations, what was really cool is that we had them just think about their own lives. And the fact that in some cases, you have to understand that when you ask somebody to tell you their story, but you've never asked them before, it's hard for people to just trust in that moment. So understanding that this building true diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is always going to be a journey. There will be different parts that you get to where you can celebrate, and please celebrate even the smallest of wins that you have. But if you're going for something where you want to go from, just make a whole shift in like a month, people aren't going to believe that. It's performative. It doesn't feel good. People feel forced into conversations or forced into situations. Trust, it really will be broken, not built. So it really became important that as we were having conversations with leaders to help them to understand that even you going on this journey, you're not gonna change overnight. So understand that and be patient with yourself. Give yourself some grace and think about what you can do differently in the smallest of ways, but still have an impact each day. Do something different. And we found that leaders were just like, okay, and so where do I start with that? Okay, well, think about your own experiences. And then think about the fact that not everybody's had those experiences before. So whenever someone goes to share something with you, take the time to actually listen, not immediately respond. Ask more questions, if they'll allow that in that moment. Share more about you when you have that moment to do that. Talk about when you were growing up. What was the first leadership experience you had? We had people who talked about their paper routes and who talked about being lifeguards, but what it meant from a human perspective. And doing that made them human in the moment, and so titles went away and all the ego started to sort of fade back. And once again, you're humans just having a conversation. So I think all of this is important, but I also can't leave out the fact that when you do this work, the concept of social justice is up underneath all of this. And our country and the world is really grappling with a lot of that right now. And so there are lessons every day. One of the things that I learned most recently, or actually it was last year, but I knew it, but it was one of those things that when you're reminded of something, like I said, it's a journey. You don't just get there and you're just there. People, you have situations that remind you we ain't done yet. Mm-hmm. And connecting with an attorney who does really great work and shared with a lot of chief diversity officers last year, become really close with your legal departments. Let them help you. Right. And a lot of people were kind of like, like they only want to hear whenever something's going wrong or that's when they call or whatever. And it's like, okay, so fix this by taking the first step and saying we're partnering. We need to be lock arms. I need to learn your language around this, because when it comes down to it, an organization should be focused on DEI&B for all employees. And I know there are some people who would say, oh, Terri, there are some people who may not need as much, but you can't tell me that people don't go through life changes that are in your workplace. I know of people who have lost their spouses suddenly. That changes you. You show up differently after that. People who look at their teams one day and realize, I have a team made up that's very homogenous. By the way, this can happen in HR. And when it happens in HR, it's usually a whole lot of women. And it's like, we need to think about this, So it can happen in lots of spaces. And it's like, okay, don't make this a death sentence for yourself. Give yourself grace, but get to work and treat it like any other business imperative that you would, because it's important for you to focus on it. So Bill, you have goals and strategies. You have ways that you will celebrate some of the wins, but whenever things aren't going well, you deal with challenges. You hire people who can help you. And sometimes that comes from outside because they can see things that you can't, because you're too insular. All of these things become important, but they're important for any type of business imperative, right? Treat it the same in the workplace.
Yes. Look, I love the human that you mentioned, because the title of the podcast, The Human Role, everything always ties back, right, to just that human aspect. Communication is like key. I was stressing that a lot in my last culture episode, because even the real talk that you were saying your colleague had come together with. So if an employee has never even heard from this manager, right? Or just, it can kind of scare them if someone happens to reach out. That happened a lot over the last some odd years where, if you're managing people and they get so used to you, but then they hear from like someone above you, it's kind of like, wait, am I in trouble? What's happening? And so you've got to kind of just still, anyone in an executive position, a CEO, of some sort, CHRO, even if you're not managing people, I think it's still important for you to still show your face, still walk around the office, still speak to everyone, still make people feel comfortable. So that's really key to what you were talking about, because then they feel included, right? And they don't feel so shy. And then the more you're sharing your story, I think they feel that empathy, and then that allows them to open up more. Who wants to just get on a call for someone you never talked to? You know nothing about them. They know nothing about you. And you're supposed to just, they start asking you questions. It's like, what is this? Right. So that could also trigger some type of trauma or just kind of suspicion with them. And then, of course, if you're dealing with someone who really doesn't like to open up to coworkers, because that's also a thing. And
it is a thing. It's a very real thing.
Yeah. They want to keep that kind of separate. That could be different. But if you're having these open conversations and if they feel like it's a safe space, then, good things will come with that. And then, of course, you'll start having that inclusion.
Well, what's interesting about that, Tiana, is, so this is the other hat. So I enjoy coaching. It's my life's love. I love to coach, whether it's around career stuff or life stuff. But one of the things I coach around is the fact that, by the way, people will tell you, bring your whole selves to work. Please don't. You don't need to see your whole self. You need to see your best working self in that workplace, right? The skills that you already have, the skills that you're developing. We need that part of you. And so there are people who misconstrue and say, oh, well, since it's such a safe space, I can just share anything. And it's like, no, you don't do that. So helping to integrate that or balance it in some way also becomes very important.
I have seen some interesting emails come across where employees have shared a little too much with too large of a group. And it's like, ooh, no, if you're sick, you're sick. We don't need to know every single detail. So not even down to like the color of what your sickness spit out as, right? We don't need that, please. So it's interesting. But we've gone through a lot of good stuff. Before we close out, one last question. So you touched base on your executive coaching. So I want my network to kind of hear a little more in depth if you have anything additional you want to share with that, in case anyone needs some support and needs to reach out to you, including myself. And I like to just ask for like advice. So anyone who is just starting in this industry, that includes diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Any advice for them, or someone who might be looking to actually get into it, right? If they're, in an early stage of like career selection or change over? Any advice you would give to them?
So one of the pieces of advice I will share about this work is attach it to something else. If you're going to go and take a role in DEI&B, I'm going to ask for you to also think about what else do you enjoy doing? So are you a leadership development person? Do you enjoy that? Are you an analytical person? Oh, because honestly, when it comes down to this being a business related, it's about the data, right? Data heavy. And so literally it's like, what are you attaching it to? By the way, what's your own story about your own diversity, your inclusion story, your equity story, and your belonging story? It becomes important to recognize and start with self first, because that'll always help you, as you mentioned, have empathy for others. But when it comes to doing the work, any role that you are in the organization, technically you're dealing with DEI&B every day. It's just in different ways. And you may not see it that way, but you are. You're figuring out ways, especially when you have that top employee who may be different from you in so many types of ways, but that's probably the reason that they're successful in what they do. You find ways to be inclusive, to appreciate, not just be tolerant of their diversity or their differences. You find ways to celebrate them because you know what they're bringing to that team. Look for that in everybody that you connect with. Whether you are a manager managing people, whether you're a leader that's leading managers, whether you're a teammate, right? Because being inclusive as a peer is also important. We all have a role in this. It's shared responsibility throughout organizations to make it work. To get involved with this in this field, there are a number of organizations that I think do really great work in this space. And many of them you can just, you can Google them. And there are a lot of people that have been doing this work for a long time. And they have books, really great ones. I wish I was sitting here with my library because I would name off a few, but I will say right now, The Waymakers by Tara J. Frank is a wonderful resource. But there are so many others that are out there that you can look to. And I think it's important to do some of the reading. I think it's important to listen to podcasts. So there are certain people to listen to, I think, that are really cool around this. Ella J. Bell, who is actually one of my favorite people on the planet. She is a professor at Tuck and has been for years. And she has written several books. Our Separate Ways, she wrote with Dr. Stella Nkomo. And it is literally around the communication challenges between Black and white women. This book was written over 20 years ago. And they went to actually add on to the book. And basically they were able to, I think they ended up changing like the intro of it, but found that as they started talking with women in the workplace, found that a lot hasn't changed. There's still so many things that we get wrong from the communication perspectives as humans. And so there's still work to be done. Great book, even today, to read. Yeah. So I would say the education first, it becomes really important. And it's not always a degree. A lot of times it's figuring out what a company needs from a strategy perspective. If you're a strategy person, this is a great space for you, because you don't want a whole lot of fluff in what you're doing, because people then get tired of the fluff. They're like, yeah, why are we doing this again? Well, we're doing it honestly, so people feel like when they come into a workspace that they can bring their best selves into that space and be heard, be valued. People, it's interesting what people will do when they feel as though you're investing in them, how they will show up and the levels of contribution that they give each and every day to their work. There's something that cannot be matched around that,
And the loyalty that comes with that.
Yes, there is a loyalty that comes with that. And because they see it first, they see you having that loyalty in them. And a lot of times, when you are mentoring somebody or sponsoring somebody, I hear stories all the time. This person, I didn't even know they were my sponsor, but I had gotten a couple of promotions and got really great, tough assignments that I was able to get some support for. And then I found out who my sponsor was. They didn't look anything like me, right? Yeah. But they saw something in me. And they wanted to make sure that my name was in a room that maybe I hadn't been invited into yet. All of these things are daily work things that are also focused in DEI&B.
Yeah, look, that's beautiful, right? Don't you love being mentioned in rooms that you weren't even a part of, right? That just gets everyone. I would always say pay it forward. So that's always good. And look, to my network, we're going to close this out now. This has been great conversation, right? But reach out to Terri. Of course, I'm going to have her attached to this posting. If you are interested in any type of executive coaching from her, any type of insight, or if you're curious about the book she mentioned, once she gets back to her library, I'm sure she'll be able to.
Oh, there's so many.
Really good stuff there. So definitely reach out to her and connect with her. I know a lot of us are definitely going through like transitions this year, right? As we still dealing with the tough economy. There's a lot of things on my LinkedIn of people looking for roles, a lot of, anticipation of the election this year, right? And so I feel like laws are coming out faster than what I've ever seen them come out before, and they're changing. I was just on a webinar recently about that. So lots of things going on. So you need someone to just talk to, someone with experience in general. I think even outside of the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging space, Terri's background and experience can at least help you like general overall, right? If you just need some guidance on proper questions to ask, what to really look for. If there's any type of confusion on your side for a career space or potential career change, I would encourage you to reach out to her. So,
and the other thing, Tiana, I know a whole lot of other coaches too. So there are a plethora. And so it's like, who is your person, and so really being able to find that becomes important as well.
Perfect. There you go. She has the answers to it all. So that's great. So thank you so much, Terri, for joining us. This was such a great conversation to have. And so next up in the next couple of weeks, we're going to take some very similar road, but somewhat of a pivot. We're going to talk about women in tech and also a new workforce management system. I have their CEO coming on, and she is on her third startup. So it's going to be really good insight for any woman interested in getting into the tech space, because not a lot of women in that realm. So she'll talk about how she overcame, a lot of those roadblocks along the way. So another really great topic we're going to talk about. But I hope you all have enjoyed kind of like the 3-part series that led us up to this point. And Terri gave some amazing insight. So definitely if you're looking into more of a deeper conversation with her and want to get some more coaching from her or even her network, right? If you're just kind of confused and if it's not within her space of coaching and need her to kind of give you some guidance elsewhere, she was a really good referral from a really, really special person to me. So I know she will definitely have even more great people in her network. So definitely reach out to her. And then Terri, thanks again so much for joining. Hopefully we can have a follow-up episode down the line, maybe towards the end of the year. I'll look into some potential law changes, but looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Tiana. I appreciate it.